clothes that seem to be trending and the next best thing, only to see new trends just 2 weeks later? Although you just bought this piece of clothing, you can't complain because now you have something to potentially add to your wardrobe. This is called fast fashion, otherwise referred to as McFashion because of its ability to bring new products to the market within days. Brands in this industry include H&M, Fashion Nova, Gap, Old Navy, Zaful, Romwe, Shein, Zara, and many more. Zara is the most successful in the industry and first coined the term fast fashion in the 1990s. Fast fashion's sneaky techniques have made themselves irresistible to the world by sending out new styles every week, smart advertising, and extremely low prices. In order to understand exactly what fast fashion is, we have to understand the history of the industry. Paraphrased by An Analysis of the Fast Fashion Industry by Radner and Linden, Britain was the first to have an industrial revolution in the late 17th century. During this time, the consumer class started to prefer buying ready-made clothing instead of making their own. The very first thrift store was known as a slop shop in the late 16 and 1700s. These shops created a demand for ready-made clothing in Britain. And fun fact, ready-made petticoats were the staple in the 1600s, pictured on the right. Looking ahead, I will paraphrase from An Analysis of the Fast Fashion Industry. America has started producing, importing materials, and creating factories for clothing. Then, during World War II in the 1940s, mass production was needed in America because the resources were scarce. This came to an end in the mid-1970s when retailers became more independent. These retailers were then able to use developing countries for manufacturing. The mid-1980s were the start to the supply chain we have today, and mass production diminished. And if you don't already know, a supply chain is a sequence of steps where the product is converted from raw materials to the finished goods, which is then sold to the customer. At this time, America's consumers were demanding cheaper and cheaper prices, similar to Britain's ready-made clothing. Globalization finally occurs, so it is no surprise that the fashion industry is also expanding. I quote from the article An Analysis of the Fast Fashion Industry. Fast fashion was able to emerge because of apparel companies and moving production overseas, which allowed the cost of apparel to dramatically fall. Now the industry is becoming more recognizable and their goals more attainable with the help of technology. Retailers started to become relevant and turn the fashion business into something new, selling trendy clothes for cheap, like H&M and Boohoo, for example. Paraphrased from Ultra Fast Fashion is Eating the World by Rachel Monroe, Boohoo started to sell their clothes online, which lowered the company's costs. They found out many tactics, such as paying young social media influencers to advertise their clothing and keeping their inventory fresh to keep customers satisfied. These businesses were eventually able to put new clothing lines out every few weeks. Consumers were impressed with this way of shopping and how easily accessible it was. The fast fashion industry is able to keep up with supply and demand well. In other words, the article An Analysis of the Fast Fashion Industry by Radner and Linden states, fast fashion retailers are able to pull smaller quantities of greater product variety through the chain. This means they take many designs, each in a small amount, and then put them through the process of production and consumption. This is how they can put out so many styles in such little time. They don't have large quantities of it. They are not using the mass production method as I talked about earlier. A few questions might be remaining for you. How are they so on top of the trends? Where do they get them from? Do they create their own? This leads me to my next point. No brand in the fast fashion industry has one look. It always adapts to the current state of the world or what is convenient. The first tactic this industry uses to know what people like is celebrities. They find celebrities on social media, copy their outfits, and sell them at an affordable price. On the other hand, celebrities can be asked to promote brands on social media because this is the best way for the industry to reach its target audience. Social media was huge in daily life during the pandemic, which forced traditional stores to shut down, as most of us know. But these fashion brands were able to make even more sales online. You may have noticed that during this time, you saw more comfortable loungewear becoming popular. Some people still wanted to stay fashionable at home despite being quarantined. The article The Price of Fast Fashion by Grisey states, Boohoo sales grew 45% in the period of March 2020 through May 2020, according to the company. These brands were still able to make themselves relevant and adapt to situations better than the traditional store. The second tactic this industry uses is finding new styles from designer brands. The article The Piracy Paradox states, Balenciaga comes out with a $795 sneaker. Zara immediately offers a nearly identical looking shoe for $35.90. Taylor Swift wears a $2,675 Rick Owens biker jacket. H&M sells the knockoff for $37.80. This is an example of how they copy designer brands or brands that celebrities are wearing. This is perfect for consumers who want to keep up with fashion trends without the high prices. Fast fashion companies will sell extremely similar items that just came out on the runway or in a social media post from a celebrity. Although it seems unfortunate that these brands worked hard to create their design, this is not against the law. Paraphrased from the Piracy Paradox by Heller and Saltzman, this is completely legal and there is no protection for the labor that goes into fashion design. Even designer brands and big companies can benefit from this because it's free advertising. If cheap brands are selling high-end products at a low price, consumers will usually buy that one first. The Piracy Paradox article states, one study found that 40% of people who bought counterfeit luxury goods ended up buying the high-end version after their trial run with the cheap fake. This is definitely an upside to the fashion industry. The last tactic I will be talking about today is that this industry uses fast shipping times. The article Fast Fashion, Sustainability, and the Ethical Appeal of Luxury Brands by Anima et al. States, when faced with tight delivery demands, fast fashion companies will use higher cost local labor and expedited shipping methods. Like any business, there are some downsides to this industry as well. The article The Circular Economy and Bioeconomy in the Fashion Sector by Colasante and Diademo states, the textile and apparel industry is highly polluting given the huge volumes of energy and water required to produce clothing. Since this industry is constantly making new clothes, they use many resources and energy, resulting in various types of pollution. Once the low-quality material goes through the wash about 10 times, it loses its luster and the consumer wants to get rid of it, and ultimately buying more, which restarts the cycle. The ability to sell trending styles quickly and cheap has made the fast fashion industry extremely successful. It is constantly growing and keeping consumers intrigued. Hopefully you learned something new and helpful about the fast fashion industry today. Thank you for listening to my speech.